French pâté, glorious mixture of meats and spices and wines, and it's absolutely delicious. It's baked and then served cold. Actually, it's a kind of a meatloaf, but a very fancy one. And you bake it in an earthenware terrine like this, or that's a metal one, or just a plain bread pan. I'm using a bread pan, and I'm lining it with fresh pork fat. These are thin sheets of fresh pork fat, and they just go into the mold, and you press it in. It's almost like as though you're putting dough into it. And to get the pork fat, you ask your supermarket butcher for thin sheets of fresh pork fat. Now, here's the pâté mixture. 1.5 cups each of finely ground veal, finely ground pork, and fresh pork fat. Now that's 1 cup, 1/2 pound. Gotta have your pork fat or you're going to have a dry, tough pâté. And then to continue on, we have 1/2 cup of onions that have been sauteed in butter, 2 eggs. That holds the pâté together. And I want about 1.5 teaspoons of salt. You're going to taste all of this before you cook it. So don't put in too much at once. Pepper. That was 12 grains of pepper. A little bit of allspice. That's always good. That's about 1/8 teaspoon. And 1/2 teaspoon of very fresh smelling thyme. And then you want a little garnish for the meat mixture so that when you cut into it, it'll be attractive. I have 1/2 cup of chopped pistachios there. Or you could use truffles if you want. And then, this is the French touch, 2 or 3 tablespoons of very good port or Madeira or cognac, and a clove of garlic. And then that's all to be mixed up. You can do that either by hand or do it in a machine. Well, that machine does a wonderful job of mixing. Now, I have to taste this very carefully for seasoning, but it's got raw pork in it, and that's dangerous to eat. So I'm going to have to cook this little sample before I taste it for seasoning. Now I'm going to cook that 2 or 3 minutes on each side, then let it cool off, and I'll taste it. Now that's cooled off enough, I'll just take a little taste. Pretty good. But here's a tip. Since ultimately this pâté is going to be served cold, the flavors get muted unless they're very intense and carefully made at this point. So add whatever is needed, and then you're ready to go. So here's our lined mold, and I'm just going to put about 1/3 of that mixture right in there. Another tip, wet your hands so that it's easier to spread. And then I could fill it all just with this plain mixture like this, but what I'm going to do is to have strips of marinated duck meat. That's just been marinated in salt, pepper, a little bit of spice. And then I've got some strips of cold boiled ham. And rather than duck, you could use veal or rabbit or wild boar or whatever you happen to have around the house. Now another layer of the meat mixture. Now there's a second layer of ham and duck. There's my last little piece of duck. Then we get the final layer of meat mixture. Again, spreading it with my wet hands. Now, one final thing, a bay leaf on top, and then fold the fat over. As you notice, we've got fat surrounding this pâté, and that prevents it from crusting over, and it also bastes it. And then it needs a cover, so I'm going to use a piece of foil, and that's now ready to bake. Note that I'm baking this in a water bath, a bain-marie, and the water doesn't come near the edge of the aluminum foil. I'm doing it in a water bath because I want it to cook gently, and the oven is set at 350 degrees, and I'll come back in about 1.5 hours and check it with my meat thermometer, which should read 162 degrees. Now, after the pâté is cooked and is out of the oven, let it cool off for 1 hour. Here's how it looks. see all these juices in here. And now we have one final very important step, which is to compact the meat so there'll be no air holes and you can slice it easily. So put the cover back on, and you want to weight it down with something. I have a twin bread pan which nests in there to press the meat down, and then a weight of any kind, like some canned goods, 3 to 4 pounds, and then refrigerate that for at least a day. Now, if you've baked your pâté in a handsome terrine like this, bring the dish right to the table and serve from that. Or unmold the pâté and cut it into beautiful big slices. Serve it with little cornichon pickles and fresh French bread. However you slice it, a pâté makes a marvelous first course.